Okay, so let me show you something I've been looking into. Over the years, I started to notice that groups were, for some reason, able to learn much more effectively in most cases than individuals might on their own. I'm obsessed with figuring out how to help people develop themselves further and faster, and so when I noticed this trend, I wanted to figure out why, and I think I figured out something really interesting. We've all heard that you're the sum of the 5 people who are closest to you, or some variation of that, but why do we do that? Well, this is actually because of a concept called resonance. Imagine there was a pool of water, and on 3 different edges of this pool, there were 3 different people. And each one of those people kind of put their toes into the water a little bit so that there were ripples, there were waves coming out from where each of them were standing. Now imagine that there's someone actually also standing here in the middle, and that these ripples or waves of energy were energy that this person in the middle could get, could absorb, could be energized from. In the middle, where all 3 of these waves overlap, the signal becomes the strongest. In other words, by being in the center of a group of people who all have a certain energy, you also pick up that energy, and it becomes magnified because you're able to get so much of it from other people, from so many more other people. This is why people like Dr. Joe Dispenza can get literally thousands of people to meditate together, and they all report much better benefits than when meditating alone. Meditating on your own is great, but when it's with literally thousands of other people, the effect seems to be magnified. And you'll know this from your own anecdotal experience. You walk into a room full of excited people, and it's like they've infected you with some kind of excitement virus. You also pick up the vibe. And in the same way, if you walk into a room where 2 people have been fighting and there's tension, you can cut that tension with a knife. But what is tension? Tension's not a physical thing, is it? Well, I think that's kind of what this is. It's a physical energy that we don't see physically the way we see ourselves, or like, I don't know, this keyboard or whatever, but we can see with our heart, with our vibe. We pick up the vibe of this energy and we respond to it. The reason I use the word resonance is because this is actually a psychological concept that's been studied quite a bit. I will put some of the links to some of these studies I've got in the description below so you can read them along with me, but to give you some examples of what I think is really interesting and describe what this really is, these folks regarded resonance as an unconscious reaction in response to a stimulus. Individuals resonate to the key in which they are tuned, which is to say, their psychopathy. A high congruence of thinking and feeling exists during resonance. People are sensitive to the rhythms and pitch variations of changes, and this sounds really complex, but this is what another one of these sources actually describes as what they call the hard problem. How do micro-conscious entities combine into a higher level macro-consciousness? So we're kind of talking about consciousness at its highest level, but really practically what we're talking about is multiple brains working together, resonating off of each other and starting to synchronize. This actually has another psychological term, which is called synchrony. Not synchronization or synchronicities, but synchrony. Synchrony, which is when multiple brains start to synchronize together. They start to vibrate on the same level, so to speak. And so my conclusion has been, you've got to get people into the right rooms and facilitate the right spaces together. When AI can do all these things for us, what can't it do? Maybe it can prompt us with some right questions, but people are so siloed. Getting into the room together to undergo synchrony and being around folks who can facilitate, and you maybe even creating that space, you and I, and this is what I'm so fascinated by, how do we create these spaces so that people can have greater levels of synchrony, can experience resonance, and get greater results from it? This is what some folks might call the psychology of groups. There's also what Jung, I believe it was Jung, called the collective unconscious, right? If you're consciously creating a localized collective unconscious that's really helpful, everybody in that local place or space benefits. That's why something like a retreat, where people go away for a few days to be really specific and targeted and intentional about things, can make such a big difference. So what are some of the effects of doing this? For starters, what it does is improve motivation. When you're able to be in a room full of excited people, or folks who have gone through the same struggles that you have, or anything like this, we all know that you walk away with this shared sense of being a part of something, like you're not alone in a challenge, or you just have new knowledge and information. That motivation on the long-term grind that is any ambitious professional's career is incredibly important. In a learning environment, it actually also helps us sustain attention and to perform better, because of the way that we're now wanting to work together with other people and able to remove distractions. Because we're social creatures, we need and have each other to get the results that we want. We've always needed each other, and we always prioritize people. You see this like example of someone kind of looking at their phone while they're, on a date or whatever. That's actually socially quite rare, especially if you are desiring to get a result that you're kind of co-creating with this group together. We, generally speaking, want to be with other people and to focus on them. And we're so siloed because we don't have to be anymore. We live in like 1-bedroom box flats instead, or we go into the office but we don't speak to anyone. What happens if you consciously come together to ask important questions or overcome challenges together? Now you're bought in, and that buy-in creates focus and creates bonds. And that's actually the last part of this, a bonding experience. When you are bonded together with people, you now have a greater sense of community, a greater sense of belonging, because you've overcome things together. Learning through an online course or something is nice. Like, we have access to knowledge that is freer than ever before. That's amazing if you can apply it. So many people, though, the challenge isn't knowledge. The challenge is the application of knowledge. And I'd argue one of the biggest reasons is because we don't feel motivated to. Our bodies are expecting other people to be a part of this equation, and so rarely are they. So why don't we help ourselves out? But all of this is just kind of the physical results. I'm really interested in the psychology and neurology. So neurologically, what is going on when you start to put people together in these kind of conscious spaces, taking advantage of this resonance and the synchrony. So to go more deeply into this neuroscience then, when we're talking about resonance, we're talking about neural resonance specifically. And my understanding is that neural resonance is this kind of synchrony process where brains start to synchronize together. In other words, my neurons that fire together wire together, but if we are learning together, then our neurons will both start to fire in the same way. And this has been proven. I remember one study, which I'll need to find, that a podcast guest of mine was telling me about, actually. So I think she sent it to me, where different people, but they think similar things in similar ways, their brains start to look similar to each other. And the example that I was given was people who vote similarly. You can tell, or you can presume, you can sort of figure out what someone's gonna vote for, or what way someone is gonna vote based on a brain scan. Probably not perfect accuracy, but it's interesting that different brains start to match up. It's not just my brain starting to look a certain way. It's that all our brains, when we think on a similar way, in a similar level, convinced by similar arguments, consuming similar media, we all start to think similar ways. But what if that can be used to your advantage? What if you can put people together so that neural resonance becomes a line? We have this kind of alignment taking place where other brains are so aligned to yours that you almost get deeper cognitive processing, which is sort of a fancy way of saying that our brains are now able to process information kind of better together, as long as that information is relevant to what we've been talking about. So, for example, I know so many entrepreneurs where they try to build in the UK and they go to San Francisco, right? They go to Silicon Valley and they're like, the energy is so different here. It's like, is it really? Like, if you know the same things, how big of a deal could it possibly be? It's not just that VCs write checks faster or whatever. What is going on? It's like there's something in the air. Enough brains are able to literally infect other brains like a zombie virus, but useful. okay, so my question then becomes, how can we consciously choose to align ourselves by facilitating conscious spaces so that this deeper cognitive processing begins to happen, and that we're now thinking therefore more critically and more fully about whatever it is that we need to be talking about. Whether that is, how do I deal with my relationships while I'm building a business, to straight through to how do I build the business itself. These conversations, you get deeper, richer answers to them when multiple people with similar cognitive thinking or who are interested in the same things, i.e. success in their business, can come together to do that thing. This is like emotional attunement. I would call that attunement. The same way that you have a guitar that needs to get tuned so that it sounds a certain way, you emotionally need to kind of almost tune yourself up so that you are in a healthy enough condition and sound and come across the right kind of ways. Neurologically speaking, by facilitating these spaces, you almost get like an emotionality that can improve. If I feel like crap, my business is gonna do crap. Like, that's pretty simple, right? But what if I feel amazing, or at least don't feel stuck? Because I'm in a space where I'm with all these brains that think similar to me. Now I have clarity. That clarity can be mental, it can also be emotional. And as a result, I'm removing stuck energy that might get in my way. Okay, so all of this is to say what exactly, right? I'm kind of making the argument here that shared group experiences can have a much more profound effect on us than kind of learning something that's purely knowledge or memory-based one-to-one. But it isn't just about coming together in groups. What this kind of psychological, neurological stance really shows me is that we are able to create experiences if they're consciously facilitated so that everyone gets more out of that experience. If you've ever gone to like a breakfast event where there's a specific topic for people to talk about, relationships, business, the nature of consciousness, these are just some examples that I've hosted, so maybe I'm biased. But anyway, people are like, if you have the right group of people together, which is important, people who interested in an interesting result, that they want to build bonds, they're here maybe with no specific agenda other than their own growth, and it's facilitated the right way, the right prompting, the right questions, the right listening, and the right group of chosen people, then what you get is everyone wanting to contribute, everyone learning something, and everyone being so focused. No one's looking at their phone. Even if there are fires going on in the business in the background, it can wait until the end of the hour or whatever it is. Okay, now imagine that times 100, times a few days or a week or even more, maybe, whatever you have the capacity for. The same way that someone who takes 10 days out to go on a meditative retreat or even just a normal vacation reports, actually improved productivity and effectiveness, I'd argue just a few days away. It doesn't have to be full of workshops or hard work. It can be lots of fun and games, but you're in a shared space with other brains that want to synchronize to yours so that you can all get better results, and you're encouraged to do so by the right facilitators. That, to me, is really, really exciting. And I hope that I've convinced you that shared spaces with the right people facilitated in the right ways helps your brain do better and learn some things. Let me know. I'd love to hear from you, and I hope you have a great one. See you very soon.